Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me say right from the start, I have no hesitation in adding my voice to support for our honourable colleague's motion to improve water facilities in First Nations communities. I thank him for demonstrating his party's willingness to work with all parliamentarians to advance an issue that has been a priority for members of this side of the House since first forming government in 2006. I can assure the opposition that the Conservative government shares its commitment to ensuring that all First Nation residents will have access to safe, clean, and reliable drinking water. We recognize that access to safe water, the efficient treatment of wastewater, and the production of sources of drinking water on First Nations land is critical to ensure the health and safety of First Nations people. This has been repeatedly demonstrated through our repeated investments and in partnerships with First Nations communities all across this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our government has made access to safe drinking water and effective wastewater treatment on reserves a national priority. Between 2006 and 2013, our government will have invested approximately $2.5 billion, that's 2.5 B with a billion, Mr. Speaker, in water and wastewater instruction in infrastructure in First Nations communities. These funds have been put to work under the Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development Canada's Capital Facilities and Maintenance Program, as well as the First Nations Water and Wastewater Action Plan and Canada's Economic Action Plan. These investments have steadily increased the effectiveness of water services for First Nations people and for First Nations, of course, communities. In making these investments to address water challenges on reserve, Mr. Speaker, our government has also made it a priority to work in partnership with First Nations peoples to make sure that they fully benefit from these investments and their voices heard. Take the example of Moose Deer Point First Nation in Ontario. Our government invested $18 million toward the community's new water treatment plant. That water treatment system featured an intake and a wet well. It also includes a slow sand filter treatment. This system enables water production that meets the guidelines of Canadian drinking water quality. Thanks to investment by the Moose Deer Point First Nation, the Government of Ontario and our government, local residents now also have a new recreation and health centre. By investing in the health and wellness of First Nations communities, we are also helping to stimulate the local economy and open up opportunities for community members to enjoy fitness activities close to their own homes. Our government has invested in 17 capital infrastructure projects throughout the Atlantic region to achieve both social and economic progress. While these funds are primarily targeted at water and wastewater infrastructure, they are also helping to fund road construction and road maintenance, plus emergency management, such as purchase of new fire trucks, which also depends on a reliable supply of water. All of these investments in community infrastructure for First Nations are helping to stimulate economic growth, foster sustainable First Nation communities, and support stronger, safer, and healthier communities. The Shishashi Inuit First Nation in Newfoundland and Labrador is receiving over $7 million to facilitate upgrades to its wastewater collection and for the design and construction of new mechanical sewage treatment plant. This investment, Mr. Speaker, has enabled the community to improve its wastewater disposal while creating over 1,600 hours of employment. Mr. Speaker, on the opposite side of the country, the White River First Nation in Yukon Territory is benefiting from design changes in two treatment plant systems to help temper water correctly, as well as new inline chlorine analyzers. These improvements are empowering First Nation groups to provide clean, safe water to all people in their communities. The Inuit First Nation British Columbia has taken advantage of our government's $1.4 million investment to enhance the drinking water system in that community by constructing ultraviolet and chlorine disinfection systems as well. Then there is the example of the Dena'ina First Nations of Alberta, which opened its Chaton water system plant earlier this year. The new plant is equipped with membrane filtration, the latest in water filtration technology. This new technology goes beyond the convenient or conventional plant filtration and delivers quality that surpasses the requirement of current standards. Construction was completed on a new raw water reservoir at the water intake pipe was also replaced on this reserve. Repairs were also completed on the existing water plant, the fire pump, and water to maintain the optimum existing plants. The Government of Canada contributed $11.8 million to this initiative from the $1.4 billion investment in Aboriginal people under Canada's Economic Action Plan. But it was the work and the planning at the community level, Mr. Speaker, that really made this project happen. The community leaders and residents of the Denete recognized that in addition to ensuring safe, clean drinking water, infrastructure projects like this brings forth other benefits. They provide opportunities for skill development and meaningful jobs. They help to spur economic growth, laying the foundation for long-term prosperity. The Black Lake and Fond du Lac communities of the Denshenu First Nation in Saskatchewan also reap the benefits of our government's $18 million investment in 2 new sewage systems. Likewise, the Piapot Cree First Nation has benefited from partnerships with the federal government. Our $4.2 million investment in the community has resulted in the expansion of its water treatment plant, including the building of a new well, increasing building and reservoir size, and the development of new treatment equipment that carries out reverse osmosis. In Manitoba, Mr. Speaker, the water and sewer project at Fisher River First Nation has been completed, generating positive results for local residents. It consists of a new water treatment plant, a new lagoon, water distribution, and sewage collection piping, as well as multiple trucks. Again, the benefit extended beyond immediate improvement to public health to include economic development opportunities for the people of Fisher River First Nation. Another inspiring example of the power of partnership is the water treatment plant at Kainatuo in Quebec. The community water treatment plant is truly an outstanding facility that meets the needs of this community's growing population. Mr. Speaker, I could cite further examples all across the country. This story I have outlined underscores the power of partnerships and what we can achieve when we work together toward common goals. Partnerships are acknowledged that responsibility for providing water and wastewater services to First Nations is shared among band councils and the federal government. Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development Canada provides funding and advice regarding the design, the construction, the operation, and maintenance of water and wastewater facilities. It also sets standards through protocol and provides funding for training staff such as water treatment plant operators. But the hands-on, day-to-day business of water and wastewater management rests with the communities. That's why we must work together, Mr. Speaker. Our long-term goal is to do more than just improve water quality. We also want to increase the capacity of First Nation communities to manage and operate water and wastewater services, plus develop skills to design and construct facilities in accordance with established standards. Through initiatives such as Circle Rider Training Program, which other speakers have highlighted, the number of First Nation operators who are certified or in training toward certification has steadily increased. The extension of the First Nation Water and Wastewater Action Plan continues to support water and wastewater treatment facilities constructed in the renovation as well as the operation of maintenance of these facilities. Training of operators and related public service activities on reserves are part of this program. In Budget 2010, the Conservative government recognized the need to continue to support First Nation communities in the provision of safe water treatment. We allocated an additional $330 million to extend the First Nation Water and Wastewater Action Plan to 2 more years. This funding is in addition to the annual departmental allocation of approximately $200 million and the $187.7 million over 2009-2011 under Canada's Economic Action Plan. Of course, Mr. Speaker, there are challenges that remain. These challenges will require the concerted and cooperative effort of all parliamentarians. This was reinforced by the National Assessment of Water and Wastewater Systems in First Nations community. As the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development acknowledged at the time of its release, more needs to be done, especially in areas like capacity building and monitoring. Mr. Speaker, I want to point out that this is the first time that a national assessment of this scope has ever been commissioned by a federal government. It is a reflection of our commitment to transparency and accountability. The national assessment is an unprecedented tool of reference that will support our work going forward. We have developed a response plan to address the findings and recommendations of that report. The response plan builds on current programs and initiatives to improve on-reserve drinking water. We will implement this plan in partnership with the First Nations communities. Mr. Speaker, our government will continue to work with First Nations by investing in infrastructure, monitoring, and capacity. Work is currently underway to address 15 high-risk water systems this year. Our infrastructure alone, our government plans to invest in an additional 57 water systems by 2015 fiscal year. A very ambitious but doable project, Mr. Speaker. In addition, we will continue to invest in capacity building, which was highlighted in the report as a major challenge to maintain effective water and wastewater systems. However, we also recognize that legislation is required to ensure that First Nations have the same protection regarding safe water as other Canadians already have. We were already well on our way to achieving that goal prior to the last election with the introduction of Bill S-11. As a result of the dissolution of Parliament on March 26, 2011, the proposed Safe Drinking Water for First Nation Act died in committee on second reading in the Senate. Certainly not our wish, Mr. Speaker. I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that this was only a temporary setback. The Minister of Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development and his officials have been engaged in a dialogue with First Nation on safe water drinking water. With the benefit of this input, the Minister will reintroduce legislation to ensure that First Nations have access to safe, clean and reliable drinking water. The opposition has no reason to doubt that the Conservative government will continue to make safe drinking water and effective wastewater treatment on reserves a national priority from coast to coast to coast. I urge all members of Parliament to work with the Government of Canada to accelerate the progress we have already made on this very important file. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.